Welcome to the Unity product roadmap for 2019. We're going to project as much as possible to try and overcome the background noise. If you can't hear me, come closer. There's plenty of seating. I'm Will Goldstone from the Unity product management team.
I'm Arisa Scott, graphics product manager.
And we are going to run through today's presentation in the following format. We have a production section, a roadmap by role, and then we're going to try and fit in Q&A as well. We have a lot to get through, so excuse us if it feels like we're just running through a million bullets. We're going to do as much as we can.
And we will be sharing these slides online later, so you don't need to click affiliate 5 million times.
Yeah, we're going to put up a PDF of this, so don't feel that you have to take photos unless you just want to see us looking cool. So, first off, production, working with Unity. So, I've just realized a very important thing, which is that we don't have speaker notes. So I'm going to pause real quick, pretend this didn't happen.
Not at all.
And
we only have 100 slides and 2 product managers,
everything. It's going to be great. Bear with.
So great.
Bear with. Bear with. Bear with. Keep bearing with. That's the wrong one. This is my favorite
Technology.
part. Okay. Cool. So now, in theory...
Hey! Speaker notes!
As I was saying, we're building a solid foundation from prototype to production for everybody. Hope no one took a photo of that. So, here's what we heard from all of you. You want a stable Unity to work with, easier, frictionless access to new features, so that's packages, an easier way to manage your versions of Unity, and simpler team management and licensing for your studio. So let's talk about that. So we release Unity in 3 point releases throughout the year, .1, .2, .3, and at the end of the year we have what we call LTS, that is our long-term support. And what we're trying to do is make sure that you can upgrade between LTS versions. So LTS is our most stable, recommended for production version. We also then have packages, which is how we deliver features. So you can see some examples in red on the right here. And basically, we have a preview, which we hope you will jump on board and try stuff out. We don't recommend it for production. We then leave preview, and then we verify it for production with a particular version of Unity and with a particular set of other packages. So those packages can be managed in the editor with the package manager, and we have a bunch of new things coming to that. In 19.1, we have improved development workflows, so you can install packages directly from a Git repository. We have what we call scoped package registries. So this allows you to basically host your own package registry. So in your studio, if you want to manage your own packages and how they work, then you can do all of that. And there's also visualization for dependencies, which is really important. So if you are removing or adding a package or doing anything which changes your configuration, you'll be able to visualize the impact on other packages. Very important. In 2019.2, we have package authoring coming for the asset store. So very cool. So if you're an asset store publisher and you need to work on packages, this is super useful. And we're creating an asset store submission flow such that you can get those packages through to the store. And that will also include test validation suites that you can access through the web portal. In 19.3, we have a native asset store package consumption. So in the past, when you've used the old .unity package format, you haven't been able to kind of install and uninstall things. And this is really, aimed to correct that. So the new package format will allow you to install, have semantic versioning that allows you to see exactly what package goes with which version. And the Unity Hub is how we deliver Unity to you. Obviously, it's something that's been out for a little while now, version 1. But we have version 2.0 in beta right now, or in beta. And it's got an improved project list with a search, the ability to remove projects. It's got a scalable UI. And for beginners in Unity, we're introducing a set of beginner onboarding templates as well. And in the next version of the Unity Hub, 2.1, we're adding a command line interface for you to automate all kinds of things, which is very cool, and a new Learn section to allow you to get hold of more sample projects. Licensing, the most exciting part of our deck. We are adding new license entitlements for all different levels, including enterprise. So that includes things like floating license support, something that's very useful for studios and for education, as well as closed network editor deployment for anyone who's not able to go online within their studio. This is backwards compatible with 18.3 and LTS, as well as 2019.1. Next up, the editor UX and design. So the mission is to improve core workflows and modernize the editor. So the things that we heard from you are more efficient and accessibility within, more efficient workflows and accessibility within the editor, more performant asset management systems, and a more modern interface. So the shortcut manager is the first part of this in 2019.1. It's very cool. It's something that sounds really basic, but we haven't had it in Unity just yet. So it's very good that we now do. You can create shortcuts for any action. You can use the interactive UI, which has modifiers and keys. It's got an API. So if you're a tools developer, you can use that. If you're an asset store developer, you can create shortcuts for your own tools. And you can create shortcut maps and share them throughout your studio if you wish to use the same shortcuts. And you can manage and resolve any conflicts that arise with these shortcuts. The console window is the next one. In 2019.2, we're adding a clickable stack trace, which is really useful for identifying exactly what's going wrong with a particular error in your code. Searchable logs, which of course make that even simpler, as well as a clear on build functionality. There's the new asset import pipeline, which is coming throughout 2019. So very important, and this will allow you basically to go from having just huge import times down to what we hope by the end of the year is on-demand import, basically. So look out for that. We have a compatibility mode, which is basically allowing you to go from your existing projects and start using bits of this new asset import pipeline throughout 2019.1, .2, and .3. And it will also allow for faster platform switching, I should have said. So the new editor UI theme is coming in 2019.3. This is a new minimal design designed to improve clarity, has new icons, unified styles for all kinds of things, and HDPI support on both Mac and PC. It's got new OS optimized UI fonts and hover states, which we're demonstrating in this GIF. So this allows us certain UX affordances, as you can see when we're hovering over certain parts of the UI. We can see, for example, the eye icon of scene visibility, which is another new feature we'll talk about shortly. And you can basically hover over anything and get more in-context feedback, which is really helpful. Quick Search is the next new feature coming as a package in 2019.1. So Quick Search is very much like Spotlight for Mac. You can basically use, I think it's Alt and Shift, and it pops up this thing. You can search for assets, game objects, scenes, basically anything. You can search for preferences, and you can even drag in things from the results that you get. So if you search for an asset, you find it, you want to drag it straight into the scene, you can do that. You can even search for documentation through this. So it's basically a unified search for everything that you could want to do in the world of Unity. Super helpful. And in the future development, we're working on async queries for that, as well as further UX refinements, so please give us your feedback. Next up is Project Tiny. So Project Tiny you will have heard of before. The mission here is to create a new runtime that's optimized for making fast and tiny downloadable content. So what do we hear from you? You want small file sizes so that this content can load instantly on resource-constrained devices. Your customers need to have fast gameplay performance on a broad range of devices, and that it's currently pretty painful to actually do this without any industry standard tools. So that's what we're building. So it's currently in preview. You can download this through the package manager, and it's basically an editor mode that you switch into. We have industry-leading size and load times, smooth performance on a range of devices, as I said. The editor experience is very similar to Unity that you already know, if you do. And it exports to 2D with HTML5, and we have 3D and AR to come as well. In Q2 2019, we're switching from TypeScript, which is currently how you interact with this. It's an ECS architecture, over to C#. And then in the second half of this year, you're going to be able to get the 1.0 release of Project Tiny, or Tiny Mode as we call it. Next up is platforms. The mission, very simple, build anywhere, minimal effort. So what do we hear about that? Cool. Well, we heard that you want to deepen platform support whilst opening up a broader range of features for all of the different platforms. We want to make it easier for you to code a feature once, and Unity just takes care of the rest of it for you in a typical Unity fashion. And you want us to continue to improve iteration time on any target device, as well as a more customizable runtime at the end. So our platform foundation. So first thing to mention is our input system. That's ready in preview, so check that out. It's really useful. We're going to talk about that in more depth in a moment. And in 2019 and .1 and .2, we're improving a lot of iteration time on IL to CPP and also bringing you improvements to incremental garbage collection. And we're going to continue investing on reducing that iteration time across all devices. So look out for a lot of speed improvements throughout this year. In 2019.3, we have what we call the DOTS runtime, so that's the data-oriented tech stack runtime. So when we say it's DOTS only, this is a burst compiler, multi-threaded, highly performant C# using ECS, so ultra high performance. It's customizable, therefore it's package-based. You can get the C#, do whatever you want with it. And therefore it's lightweight and flexible. You can remove parts that you don't want. So for example, if you didn't need a renderer, you could get rid of that, use it as a server runtime, do whatever you like, compute simulations, anything. Next up, mobile in 2019. Well, we have a lot coming from mobile this year. So in 2019, when you install Android, you get the SDK and the NDK straight away. So as soon as you install Unity, you get everything you need to deploy to Android and have the correct version, which is great. We have support for lots of other stuff like safe area, notches, improvements to Vulkan for rendering, local shader keywords. You know about that, right? Yeah,
which is all about moving from global shader keywords, which has been a huge pain to try and cut down on your keyword limit, to now it's 256 keywords per individual shader.
Awesome. And we have Android-wide color support, and we're moving the Android build system over to Gradle, which is Google's new recommended system. In 2019 as well, we also have support for Android logcats, which is automatically going to be triggered when you build and run your project. And there's scripts only, and you get to see that actually in the editor, as you can see from this image, or these images, I should say. And we have scripts-only patching on Android, so if you want to just not have to rebuild absolutely everything, you can do that and just modify your scripts, which is amazing. As well as systrace for Android profiling, and you can get that in the context of the editor as well. So we're trying to reduce all of the different places that you have to go in order to be a mobile dev, and keep everything in context in the editor. Next up is adaptive performance. We talked a bit about this in our keynote. So this is a collaboration with our friends at Samsung. And basically you'll get this first for the Samsung S10. And what that means is it's a way of balancing your GPU and CPU load to avoid thermal throttling, reducing performance during your game. Check out the keynote for more information on that, and I'm sure there's been a talk as well at some point that I've missed. We also have improved support for Replay Kit on iOS, and better support to get around all of the many, many different notches that mobile manufacturers are bringing out on Android, as well as local notifications if you're an app developer on iOS and Android as well. And dynamic resolution in lightweight render pipeline
is awesome for saving on the GPU because you're scaling your resolution dynamically as it would turn out.
Awesome. Then for consoles, traditionally we don't say too much in roadmap talks about consoles because it's a lot of NDA-based stuff. But if you have a contact with us or with your platform vendor, you can talk more to them. What we can tell you is that in 2019.2, we have the incremental garbage collector coming to all of consoles. That helps reduce spikes within your game by reducing them, deferring them to a frame where it doesn't matter as much. And in 19.3, we have the full release of the HD render pipeline for PS4 and Xbox One. Very cool. More on that from Arisa later on. And in future, we have network services coming for all of the consoles, of course, the DOTS runtime that I mentioned coming to all the platforms. And we're trying to decrease the friction generally when dealing with licensing so you have a smoother experience with those. Then desktop and web, lest we forget, in 2019.1, we're releasing IL to CPP for Linux. We are adding support for HDRI to UWP and Windows, threading support to WebGL, that's going to be an experimental feature for now, as well as headless rendering support, a minimal player loop for server builds, and ARM64 for UWP and HoloLens as well. In 19.2, we have Xcode project generation for macOS, so similar to iOS, you'll be able to dig in with those Apple tools if you want to, and minimal content builds for headless servers as well. Then a biggie that we heard from Google this week is, of course, Stadia. This is Google's streaming gaming platform, and we're going to be obviously fully supporting that. We have a familiar deployment experience to everything else you're already used to in Unity. It's an IL to CPP based platform It's a Linux-based OS, as I'm sure everybody's heard by now. It's using Vulkan for rendering. We'll support all of the usual Unity features that you know and love, and we'll have support for this by the end of the year, or towards the end of the year. More news on the blog from that. Then XR, of course, another beloved platform. In 2019, we have a lot of graphics enhancements. So you can tell us about lightweight render pipeline, right?
So much about lightweight render pipeline.
Yeah. So
we'll get those slides.
Yeah, we'll get there in a moment. Lightweight render support for VR and stereo rendering mode fallbacks. And we're supporting our friends at Magic Leap, just over there, who are going to have Lumen OS support built into Unity, so no more SDK shenanigans. In 2019.2, even more graphics enhancements. We have Vulkan rendering on Oculus Go and Oculus Quest, and post-processing support for stereo instancing, making things even more efficient and pretty at the same time. And of course, platform support, we're revamping SDK, loading, and management system to make that even more efficient. And in the future, we are adding HoloLens 2 support, of course, as well as HDRP for VR platforms. Arisa's going to talk about that later too. And a multi-platform XR input system is still coming. AR Foundation, we talked about this in our keynote also. This is something that we're very excited about, and it does lots of cool things. It's basically a complete toolkit for anyone who's making augmented reality games. We have lightweight rendering support, we have optimized camera texture, access APIs, face tracking, image tracking, object recognition, and environment probes for ARKit. We have a whole host of editor remote features, and in 19.2, we're hoping to verify this for production. So there's a lot going into AR Foundation. If you're working on AR content, please check it out. It's very, very cool. Next up is connected games. So the mission here is to create a scalable real-time multiplayer solution pretty much for anyone and everyone. So what do we hear from you? We heard that you want a low latency, consistently at global scale. More players per session without sharding, game services with top scale and reliability without hiring a services and ops team of your own, and you want to securely prevent people from cheating with server authority, and you want a full stack so that all of those tools are managed in one place rather than all kinds of different people and places to deal with. And you want the flexibility to meet the needs of your particular game. So this is the kind of stack that we're building. Okay, so you have a networking transport layer. We unveiled that with our FPS sample game that we talked to you about towards the end of last year. We have the client and server runtimes, a host of services, web tools on top of those, as well as client and editor tools that you can access. So the first big part of this is DOTS networking. So again, data-oriented tech stack, lest we forget. And we already showed you the new network transport with the FPS sample game and released the FPS sample netcode so that you can start digging into that. And then this year, we're doing basically a host of different things that you can see from top to bottom in that order. Not too sure on the dates, but it's throughout this year. So starting with reliability, replication, and compression early in this year, and mid-year, more first-person shooter simulation features like prediction, interpolation, lag compensation, and then towards the end of the year, mobile-specific features, so things like IPv6, Reconnect, integrated bandwidth profiling tools, and all that kind of stuff. So that's the networking part of the stack. Then we have, of course, hosting. And of course, when you're talking about hosting, we have multiplay. Part of the Unity family for a little while now, I think just over a year, I think. And they're providing industry standard or industry leading hosting for everybody. So we're basically providing all of the things that you see in this list. It's powering games like Apex Legends, Titanfall, and lots of other amazing stuff, Rocket League. And yes, we're aiming to deliver all of this stuff. So this includes things I've forgotten, which are command line tools to enable automation and deployment of new builds, dashboards, managing the locations of all of your server fleet, profiling and debugging tools, and also very important billing and cost prediction tools so that you don't overrun when operating your game. Then matchmaking, something we talked about last year was a partnership with Google on OpenMatch. This was an open source project that we're doing in collaboration with all of you. And then in addition, we're also working on multiplay integrated matchmaking. So this is currently in alpha, and the idea is this, basically we're adding latency-based matching, and the ability to create and deploy custom match logic. So this is group support for any kind of game that has join in progress, or games that need to add people to already populated huge servers. And then in parallel, we're going to add tools for analytics and debugging to ensure that all of your development workflows are supported. Another partner that's just joined us as part of the Unity family is, of course, Vivox, or possibly Vivox or Vivox, depending on where you're from. This is a voice and text chat service, so something that's really useful to integrate with your games if you're thinking about making a connected game and building an audience with all of your players. So something that we wanted to point out about this is that adding a communications platform, this is what Vivox tell us, is that it's been proven to increase engagement with your players by at least 2x, and it improves retention, enhances gameplay, and obviously you build a community out of your players. And the way that this integrates with Unity is that you're able to get, for free, up to 5,000 peak concurrent users before you start paying. So you can start to build a community within your game straight away, which is pretty cool. Next up, developer services. So what do we do with developer services? Well, they're trying to help you ship faster and operate successful products. So what do we hear from you? That you want a more stable collaborate experience with more workflow features inside the editor. That merging assets is actually very, very difficult and needs to be fixed. I think we knew that one. And you want a better performance and flexibility from things like Unity Cloud Build. So first up, our dev dashboard, as we call it. We recently added a bunch of features, some highlights, transactional emails, a lot more easy configuration, improved the UX. We're working on digest emails, Trello support, Microsoft Teams support. We're standardizing this service for JSON if you have webhooks using that. Then Collaborate itself as a product, we have a whole new 2.0 version coming in 2019.1 timeframe. And by 2019.3, we'll have branching, a new UI. We'll have replaced YAML merge, which is obviously very, very good. And also we have what we call a local network accelerator as well to make it even more efficient. Speaking of cloud things, Cloud Build is something that we've been doing lots of work on and integrating this with all kinds of upcoming tech. So the focus has been on interoperability and reducing build times up until now. In 19.2, we have Windows and Linux builders coming in beta, or beta. In 19.3, we have what we call a common data execution pipeline. So that means your local build will function in the same way as a cloud build. And then we also have support for Cloud Build addressables. So addressables we'll talk about in a little while. Addressables are the replacement for asset bundles, which is how you can deliver content after you ship your game. They're a whole new system, and they're much, much better, I promise. And in future, we're working on parallelized content builds to leverage cloud scaling, so you can just deliver builds to yourselves, your team, and to testers a lot more quickly. And Unity Live Notes is another feature that we've launched in alpha. We launched this in January. It's a closed alpha, but if you want to talk to some of us, then come and visit us on the booth and jump on that. Basically, it's a system where you can attach notes and share them with your team to game objects, to scenes, to assets. It doesn't live in your project, it lives in the cloud, so it's not going to dirty any of your version control or anything like that. And they all appear in real time, so it's super useful for collaboration. Cloud Diagnostics is our last one we want to talk about today. 2019.2, we have symbol upload with batch mode builds coming. This is a highly requested feature for our crashes and exceptions functionality. And in future, we're just adding a whole bunch more stuff to Cloud Diagnostics, so you can find out more about what's going on with your game that's being operated. So additional platform support, digest emails, user reports. You can see in user reports, what we're demonstrating here is that we're taking tons of screenshots as the game is being played, and they're being saved to a server so that you can debug and test and find out what your game is looking like. And we have stack trace improvements as well coming to our crashes and exceptions service too. Taking a breath, have a little drink of water. Okay. Roadmap by role, ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you about programmers. So the mission here is to bring you the utmost flexibility and importance. What did we hear from you? We heard that you want us to speed up working with Unity, you want faster compilation, shorter domain reloads. You want us to provide you better insights with improved debugging and profiling. more control of what happens under the hood, and you want us to hurry the hell up with dots and get it out of preview. Speaking of dots, the data-oriented text stack. So let's talk about the dots core. In 2019.1, we have sub-scene workflows, entity scene streaming, and a conversion API. So what do those things mean? Well, basically, this is your bridge from the game object world into the entity world, which was required for using ECS, the burst compiler, and all of those kind of things. So basically, we're providing a whole bunch of workflows in order to get you all of those performance benefits that we've been telling you about for so long at this point. And we're releasing the megacity sample that we showed you in order to allow you to see how all of those features work. So look out for that. In 19.2 will be the 1.0 release of that core API, as well as asset streaming. So that's how we get those giant worlds into megacity. An asset manipulation API, these things are so easy to say, and a new transform system which is way more efficient than our old one. Then, the burst compiler. So this is our new super fast compiler we've been talking about, and that's coming finally 1.0 in 2019.1. It's coming for PlayStation, PS4, Xbox One, iOS, Android, and Linux. And in future, the Switch as well. And of course, we're working on determinism for that entire stack. So, what else can benefit from determinism? Well, Unity Physics, ladies and gentlemen. 2019.1 is our preview release of Unity Physics. This is part of our collaboration with our friends at Havok. So this is a stateless physics engine. It's a dots-based physics engine, so it's super high performance, and it's network ready as well. So you don't have to think about how to tie together your worlds of physics with your networking and compensate and all of those kind of things. We're trying to solve these really difficult problems for you. And in future, we're also giving you access to the full Havok Physics, which is the separate middleware product powered by Havok, and that's there to handle high-end complex physics simulations for everyone from games to non-games. Then, programmers, I think you can all relate to profiling, and this is a new tool, the Profile Analyzer. In 2019, we're bringing this as a preview release, and it's basically multi-frame analysis of a single scan, and you can compare two different scans to kind of debug and understand the performance and what's happening over a range of frames. We're pretty excited about that. We think it's going to be pretty useful and pretty important. Next up is UI Elements. So this is something that you can use to obviously build editor tools for yourselves. UI Elements is actually what we're using to rebuild a lot of what makes up Unity under the hood. So a lot of the redesign of Unity that we showed earlier is built on top of UI Elements. It's a full CSS and XML-based structure. It uses Flexbox so that you get a flexible layout. It's really, really useful. It's data-driven. It has a UI debugger, which is what you can see in the top right of those four. And it's a very performant new UI renderer compared to our old IAM-GUI that a lot of you may be familiar with. And in 19.2, we have huge rendering optimizations. As you can see from this gratuitous bar chart, it is far more optimal than it used to be. And this is an example given from a node graph where we're manipulating 1,000 nodes at once. So it's far more efficient. And the things that we've got in development for this is sign distance field for text. So that's the tech that drives TextMesh Pro, if you're familiar with that, as well as a runtime support. So we want to bring UI elements into runtime so that you can use it in your games as well. And we're also going to build a visual UI authoring tool for that. Speaking of UI, lest we forget our good old friend Unity UI, aka UGUI, we didn't forget about it. We are working on mesh and particle support as well as a host of performance improvements for that, so rest assured. Another great thing for programmers, I mentioned it earlier, is the new input system. It's a whole new system, as you can see from this video. It has this environment in which you can create action maps, a series of bindings, and then tie them to devices such as gamepads and whatever else you need. It does all kinds of different things that you'd expect from a modern way of input going into your different games and different devices. There's not a whole lot else to say about it apart from the fact that it is way, way better than anything that we've had before, so please do go and give us feedback on that. It's open source, it's a package, you can dig into it, you can modify it, and go nuts. Next up, I mentioned them earlier, addressable assets. Like I said before, this is our replacement for asset bundles. Much more easy to use, much more flexible. The idea is to simplify content pack creation. So once you ship your game, you can deliver more content to your players. Simple as that, really. And this works together with the scriptable build pipeline, which is designed to help reduce build times overall, and allows you to do things like incremental build and stuff like that. In 19.3, we're aiming to verify addressable assets and scriptable build pipeline, not render pipeline, for production.
Scriptable everything.
Scriptable everything, verified in 2019.3. We're verifying that for production in 2019.3. I'm running a marathon. And in development also are some sample projects for that, so basically to help you understand what's going on with addressable assets, to help you know how to integrate them in your projects through real-world examples. And also dots integration is a big part of this. Obviously, dots is kind of the future of Unity, and we're making sure that addressables and the scriptable build pipeline is something that fits into that picture as well. I'm now going to hand you over to Arisa to talk about Animators.
Animators! So this is where we suddenly get a lot of pretty images. If any of you standing want to sit down here, we've got lots of space, I just want to say. So it's about bringing you new tools for authoring. What we've heard from you is you want to enhance your creativity, spend less time going back and forth between your GCC tools and Unity, more time in Unity, faster iteration cycles, much better. And you want to improve your productivity by understanding the way you work without having to grab a programmer at every turn, and that it has to always be performant. So we are making the creation of complex rigging systems easier and faster for artists. We have our runtime rigging package, animation rigging, in preview with 2019.1, which you can play with right now. There was a really good talk on it that should end up online later.
Yeah, do check out the talk on what we call runtime rigging. So it's basically a way of dealing with rigs and overlaying constraints and just basically creating whatever kind of complex, weird rigs, like a giant scorpion tail or anything really. It's super cool, and it's all done in the editor with handles, so you don't need to rely on a coder to create it. It's really cool.
Yeah, some of the examples included like adjusting hand grip for gun and like the kinds of animations that you would rather be doing in Engine than trying to do elsewhere. We're increasing our influences to 32 per vertex, or you can get up to 255 with an API, so you can get much more complex rigs. Kinematica, which we showed off last year, which is you provide a bunch of animations, and then based on input, we try and make the best decision about what frame we should be playing. Keyframing runtime rig will also be in preview with 2019.3, and then simple animation as a package will be coming. On the 2D side of things, sprite rigging has become more performant. We're using ECS and the Burst compiler. In 2019, we have sprite swap. So this is, you can do an animation and then use a different set of sprites and have that animation just transfer over easily. No prefab required. On timeline, we have markers and signals. I know that's a feature you were excited about.
Yeah, this is great. This is basically the event system for timeline that we've been waiting for. It's the ability to add markers to different parts, so you can jump to parts within the timeline, and then with signals you can broadcast out to event listeners that can then affect an array of game objects that are listening to that particular event. It's really cool.
And then on the audio improvements, it allows users to control and set keys for individual audio tracks while working on a timeline edit, animating an audio source, simple volume and pan control on track. We have the track modifier framework, which is also a preview package, which allows users to add modifiers to animation, audio, and video in a non-destructive way in the timeline. And then in .3, timeline's coming as a package. And we'll have customization, so you can customize the timeline UI for what's ever best for you. Video in 2019.1, we have a bunch of SRP support coming, video playback now available for both lightweight and HD, so full proper support for playing back video on cameras near and far plane. Uni Recorder also supports camera recording in the SRP set of features. We added support for transcoding playback of H.265 codec in 2019.2, variable frame rate encoder, sRGB sampling, and video clip and video importer. So important note on the video importer is, so movie texture will be deprecated in 2019.3, and so with that, move over to video player, and we're working on adding support for hardware, decoding of video on Microsoft platforms, so Windows, UWP, and Xbox One. Artists and designers. This is my favorite section because I'm a graphics product manager. So it's about new tools, better performance, better quality, all the things you want. So things that we've heard is We want to move out of being a black box. We've been shifting a bunch of our features into being C# packages, but there's definitely been a lot of frustration from users when you just can't see what Unity's doing and you have to make guesses. And that we want to enhance creativity with artist-facing tools. Artists don't want to spend their time dealing with those programmers in order to get something that looks visually stunning. And also moving out of preview. Like we definitely heard last year, it's like, these are all a bunch of great new features. Why are they all in preview? It's like, well, we're working on them. And so this is the year of things coming out of preview for us. 2019.1, SRP Core is now production ready. So if you have a really unique style, you might look into writing your own custom render pipeline. Though you can also take lightweight or HD and modify that to suit your needs. The batch render is also as part of 2019.1. There was a really great blog post on our site that went into that in great detail, and that can speed up your CPU during rendering from 1.2 to 4x, so definitely take a look at that. And then our lightweight render pipeline is production ready with 2019.1, and this is an awesome new feature that is our custom render, and this is a custom render pass being added. So normally that'd be like a command buffer, injection, doing callbacks, like a bunch of code nonsense. Instead, it's entirely in UI. So we've got this cute little effect of like, I want my character to have a toon outline. That shader was made in shader graph. No code required to get that kind of effect. Artists can start understanding render passes and digging in there. Physical camera support, SRP batchers I mentioned, also baked in direct. In 2019.2, of note, we have camera stacking. So we had camera stacking and kind of our built-in for Unity, and we had to take time to kind of recreate that system in a different way. So you might use this for if you have a first-person shooter, you want to have your gun on a different camera for field of view than the rest of your environment. The problem with the old system was you were doing culling every time you had a camera. This is not so great for performance. Luckily, with lightweight, culling is separated out. And we also have this friendly UI, so you can change what kind of camera you're on. Multipass for VR is also coming, and we're amping up the light limit for directional and per camera lights. In 2019.3, we are adding a deferred renderer to lightweight render pipeline, and we're introducing an optimized post-processing stack so that you can have beautiful effects on mobile without having to immediately crash and die in performance. And shadow mask support will be there as well. HD render pipeline, all of the features, so many features. With the biggest one that's been asked for is VR support, so we have our first version of VR support with 2019.1. HD is still in preview with .1. We have an HD specific post-processing that'll be showing off a little bit later. Our new reflection system is very cool because it is C# based, so if you want to dig in and understand that a bit, you can. And then tons of other things. In .2, specular anti-aliasing, always good for a better look. We have an eye shader, which is adding to kind of our digital human set. So in .1, we had kind of hair shader, and 18.3, we had a skin shader. So we're getting a real boy together. We have more area light types and better support. So the support is, there is now volumetrics for area light, and the light types are our disk right here, and then sphere on the next slide. We have better shadows. So this is improved shadow framework, has like contact shadows, micro shadowing, and self shadowing. So you can see kind of the before and the after. Bit more beauty. Then in 2019.3, HDRP will be production ready and out of preview. That's our sphere area light there. We're bringing back the Look Dev tool. So that is a tool that lets you view assets in kind of a variety of lighting environments. So you can troubleshoot textures or meshes. And performance is like our big focus for coming out of preview. And we're providing HDRP quality settings so you can kind of scale your high even higher, if you're doing cinematics for your game. Shader graph. So 2019.1 shader graph is production ready. And we have a really cool feature, nestable subgraphs, which I talked about a little bit in the keynote. And that is, you can make a subgraph, and then you can nest that in another graph. And so if you're a tech artist, you can be like, I'm going to provide a bunch of basic defaults, and then your artists use those. And you can own your entire shader pipeline. And you can be like, I need to change this default thing. And then a bunch of other shader graphs will just inherit that without you having to run through every single one. And then in .2, we have half precision that's toggleable per node, which has been like the most asked for thing by mobile folks because it's much needed for performance. Background compilation of preview shaders. So if you've been in shader graph and you like hit a weight, that weight will be going away. We have a custom function node. The embedded error messaging is like if you have an error coming through your shader graph, the node that is causing you problems, you will know which one it is, and you will be able to deal with that bad node. On HDRP side of things, we're adding a bunch of features, GI inputs for master node, scene depth, scene color update. We have an unlit master node and also a decal master node, so you can play with those and push them further. In 2019.3, we will have support for VFX graph. So shader graph and VFX graph will be able to talk together, so you'll be able to create much more stunning visual effects. The node overlay by type is really cool because you'll be able to change through different looks. So there'll be a default one, which will be like, just show me the types of things, and then a performance one. So if you have, a chart that is full of angry red nodes, you can be like, maybe I should decrease the number of those. And you can also create your own custom color overlay. VFX graph. So over this year, we're going to be growing our support for lightweight. Starting with 2019.1, we will have initial support for unlit in VFX graph. It's compute only, so that does limit your number of platforms as they're GPU-based particles. We have camera buffers access, static mesh compiling, point cache volume buffer. Also pre-warming, which is really nice because if you have, say, an effect of steam coming out of an event, when someone walks up to that, you don't want it abruptly starting. You want that steam flowing through nicely. In .2, we have the lit support. We're adding support for motion vectors, ribbons, and trails. We'll also have subgraphs like shader graph has, so that you can build more complex effects and separate things out a bit easier. The skin mesh sampling is nice because you can spawn particles from the surface of an animated character mesh. And then in 2019.3, we are focused on getting out of preview and being production ready, doing bug fixing and all the like. New post-processing. If you haven't seen The Heretic, watch The Heretic. We revealed in the keynote yesterday. This is just a small clip from it. It is showing off some very awesome, we've got kind of the depth of field, we've got the motion blur. This has energy conserving bloom. Another nice thing is the improved auto exposure, because if you want to have, bright brights and dark darks, you don't want to flash everything out. There's physical camera support. Then in 2019.3, HDRP post-processing will be ready for preview. And we'll have performance focused. So this is kind of an evolution of our V2 post-processing. It will no longer be a separate package. It will instead be part of the render pipeline itself. So that when you're updating HDRP, you're getting new HDRP-specific post-processing. And the effects are living directly on the camera instead of out in separate things. And so there's like HD post-processing, lightweight post-processing. They're solving slightly different problems. HD is much more about like compute-capable platforms being the most filmic and gorgeous. Lightweight is about being a solution that can look gorgeous and not die on performance. Ray tracing, that's the thing I've been asked about. It's coming. So April 4th, our oddly specific date, we will have it available on GitHub, and you will have a bunch of examples of the different effects we made. It'll be a custom build because there are C++ changes under the hood, and it will be a template that's set up so that you can start playing around with ray tracing. And this video that was shown in our keynote, it's half real, half fake, or half rendered rather. And then in 2019.3, that experimental will be less experimental and a proper preview package in our editor. Lighting. So light probes are getting a lot of improvements this year. Light probes are great for doing light mapping without having to make a bunch of UV charts. So de-ringing will improve quality in 2019.1. Also the visualization will let you tell, like the light probes will react to different colors, so you've got faster iteration cycles. Optics-based denoising, that's the image you see here. That's like a 10x speed a 10x improvement in speed. So we're just doing a bunch of AI-based denoising over the course of this year to get you much faster results, and so that you don't have to do as much sampling to get quality. In 2019.2, light probes will be able to fully participate in our global illumination calculations. So this means they'll function the same way that light maps do, but you'll just be able to use probes, no UV hassle. So they're contributing GI back to the scene. Additive loaded light probes, so that's I have a giant scene and I want to be able to load those in for large levels. In .2, still in .1, so this is specifically to our progressive light mapper, which in 2019.1, we'll be able to set a max number of light maps. So if you have a situation where you only want 3 giant light maps, or like 20 tiny light maps, do what works best for your game. We'll have MIS for environment lighting, so that vastly reduces noise when making light maps under the influence of measured environment calculations that include the sun. Power sampling improves baking time in scenes with many lights. Adaptive sampling improves baking time by spending samples where they have the most impact. So a lot of it is about how do we speed up our CPU-based progressive light mapper. And then we have our GPU-based progressive light mapper, which we introduced in 2018.3. In 2019.1, it's still in preview this year, but now we have Mac OS and Linux support for double-sided GI, per object, cast and receive shadows. And then 2019.2, we're also getting that MS for environment support, denoising support. .3 is about performance improvements and submesh support. TextMesh Pro in 2019.2, we have support for ligatures, so this is needed for languages like Arabic. And then we have colored glyphs, so this can now be rasterized from native font files and inserted into font assets. So this means you can create the emoji game of your dreams without creating any sprite assets. All this is shipped in 2019.2, but will be compatible with 2019.1 because it's a package. Visual scripting. So make scripting creation friendly for non-programmers. So with Unity quickly moving to dots, we had to reconsider our original visual scripting strategy. We stopped development on our mono behavior solution and are moving to dots exclusively for this. This enables the team to focus on one tech and improve our overall long-term velocity. And before we made this decision, it was kind of a matter of like, well, there are currently visual scripting solutions for mono behavior, and dots there's really the biggest need to provide a way for non-programmers to interact with ECS. There are a lot of tools we'll need to rebuild for dots, and visual scripting will be a huge part of it. So this means a delay. Instead of hitting 2019.2, we'll be shipping in 2020.1, but there will be previews on the dots forum, so do check that out. Terrain. In 2018.3, we introduced a brush asset type so you could make scriptable brushes. And we have a terrain brush pack, which will be available for you to download to see what our tech artists want you to try and play around with to inspire you for how you can create ones. So the brush pack includes things like clone brush, stamps, transform, pinch, smudge, twist, procedural noise sculpting brush, enhance peaks, smooth out slopes. We also have some physical erosion brushes, which terrain is, in the real world, is formed by all these natural processes, so it's very cool to put that same power in the hand of our users. So there will be a brush for thermal erosion, hydraulic erosion, and wind erosion. And each of those brushes is simulated on the GPU using a compute shader to do the heavy physics calculations. Super customizable and tunable by the user. Terrain holes, unfortunately, slipped from 2019.2 to 2019.3, but that will be coming out and you will be able to paint in holes in your terrain. In the future, we're targeting 2020.1 for the first version of this. It's layered environments, so we're taking our terrain from just being height map basically to having individual layers so you can build up your terrain in a non-destructive way to get richer and more detailed environments. World building editor updates. So we're improving usability of Pro Builder, making the editor friendlier and more functional for artists. So Will showed off earlier that scene visibility, which toggles in the hierarchy, so you can turn things on and off, which makes it a little bit easier for you to focus on things. With the Tool Modes API, which allows users to create custom tool modes more easily. Polybrush 1.0 preview, it's available as a package. You can sculpt complex shapes, painting custom lighting or coloring, blend across meshes directly in the editor. Scene view custom toolbar in .3, so we're giving you a user customizable tool shelf, so you can add what you actually need to use in your project. Scene lock, which is kind of similar in concept to the scene visibility of per object. I want to be able to lock things so that I don't accidentally change something that I don't want to. Extended Handles API creates an extensible base for users to implement their own handles, performant handles. We will at the same time extend our mesh handler to select vertices, edges, and faces. 2D. So .1 is about tuning up performance. using the best of dots to increase performance of sprite shape and 2D sprite rigging. 2019.2, we have 2D lights, so you can create visual, beautiful 2D effects. Sprites swap, which we mentioned a little bit earlier. We will also have a specific renderer that is a 2D renderer for lightweight. So similar to how in the past you might have chosen between forward and deferred, in lightweight you'll be able to choose in .2 between forward and 2D, which will remove some of that heavy 3D stuff that you don't want to bother with as a 2D person. And then we'll have a 2D master node in shader graph, so you can compose your own shaders in 2D and take advantage of everything a sprite might want to do. And then in .3, 2D shadows and light improvements to give you much mood and variation for your best burbs. Cinemachine. So in .1, we have support for HDRP post-processing, which is working together better because it's a new system. And then we have the automatic detection of package dependencies. So if Cinemachine is expecting to need something, you don't end up with a bunch of duplicates and nonsense in your project. .2 is all about stability and bug fixes, which is very important, especially because in .3, we'll have Cinemachine 3.0, which will be dots. Fully dots version of Cinemachine. And then Cinecast, which we showed off at Unite LA. That's our solution for immersive cinematic streaming and esports. So that will be available as a preview package in .3. Cloth. So with .2, we are moving to NV cloth, so it's video cloth. And we have a cloth presets package, which you can see here, that just gets you started a little bit faster. And then in .3, we are focused on improving workflows and making it easier for you to author cloth inside of Unity. Audio. So what you don't want is a black box of an audio system. So we're laying a new foundation for audio in Unity to enable more advanced and user-friendly features. The DSP graph is that foundation. It leverages data-oriented tech stack built in C#, so you can see everything. And throughout 2019, we're going to be releasing audio tech stack on top of this.
Okay.
In summary, do you want to?
Yeah, so in summary, a lot to take in. Like we mentioned before, we'll release a PDF of this deck so that you can kind of digest it a bit more at your leisure and obviously interact with us on our social channels, ask any questions you have about it. But in summary, we're trying to bring you a flexible, modded, and editor and feature set, so the latest tools. We're trying to keep everybody happy and productive, not make an over-reliance on any particular role within the product. We want to maintain quality through a tight feedback loop, so that's what packages and delivering things piecemeal is all about. And we want to fill in the gaps, so where we don't have functionality today that you need to go to other partners or third parties or plugins, we want to make sure that it all feels native inside Unity. And of course, evolving legacy systems, so taking things from the built-in renderer or things that we're deprecating, like movie texture, and evolving them, and also bringing other things into the future with the dots world. And of course, pushing opportunities in production and development, so basically making it so that you can go from everything from the tiny mode, those tiny little games, up to AAA full scale. And that is it, boys and girls. Thank you. So,
This should be singular because we've got 3 minutes. So,
sorry.
Question.
Yeah. So we've been told that we don't have a mic. So if anybody's got a question, put your hand in the air. I'm going to come and find out what your question is and repeat it.
And can we get the other Unity product managers up here?
Yeah, we have our product management team as well
Sean.
at the back. Can they all wave? Product
Wave.
management team, wave.
Wave.
Hi. Some of them reluctantly waving there. Brett, you're not in the PM team. What are you doing? Any questions at all? Okay, if not, we have our happy hour starting right now. So that's why all that booze is over there. So go and drink it. I presume it's free. I mean, right? Who
It
can
is a
say?
happy hour. It would be a sad hour otherwise.
Who would be happy without free things? Okay, so thank you all for listening, and come and talk to us at the happy hour. Thanks, everybody. Good clap.